There is this idea in education that everyone has their own preferred way of learning, their so-called learning style. If information is presented in accordance with the learning style, well, then they'll learn better. Now, there are dozens of different learning style theories, but the most common one identifies 4 main learning styles: visual, auditory, reading, writing, and kinesthetic, or VARK for short. Visual learners learn best from images, demonstrations, and pictures.
People may say things, but I can't really take it in. I just gotta see them act it out or write it or something.
Auditory learners learn best from listening to an explanation.
Like in school, I was always engaged in the lecture, and that was usually good enough to pass a test.
Reading, writing learners learn best from reading and writing.
Like I can get pretty much anything out of reading a textbook or something.
And kinesthetic learners learn best by doing, physically interacting with the world.
Hands-on. You have to touch things, you have to play with things. It's a contact sport. You have to do it yourself.
It sort of very much fits with a broad strain of thought in sort of the recent Western tradition is we're all unique, we're all different. And so you don't want to say everybody learns the same way. That sort of conflicts with our feelings about what it means to be human.
But before you take an online learning styles quiz, it's a good idea to ask, do learning styles even exist? I mean, do you have one? And if you're taught in accordance with it, would you learn better? Well, you could test this by running a randomized control trial, where first you would identify learners with at least 2 different learning styles, say visual and auditory, and then randomly assign the learners to one of 2 educational presentations, one visual, one auditory. So for half of the students, the experience will match their learning style, and for the other half, it won't. And then you give everyone the same test. If the learning style hypothesis is correct, the results should show better performance when the presentation matches the learning style than when they're mismatched. I tried a very unscientific version of this experiment on the street. For some people, I matched their learning style, so I showed visual learners pictures of 10 items. But for other visual learners, I read out the items instead. Bell, penguin, sun.
Okay, I'm maxed out.
How many can you remember?
I don't know. Pear, knife, duck, heart.
I couldn't tell you the rest. That's all I got.
Most people could remember only about 5 or 6 things.
Yeah.
6?
Yeah.
6 is not bad.
All right.
But a few could remember substantially more, say 8 or 9 items.
Bug, I don't know if I said bug. Guitar, bike, eye, bell, spoon, sun, chair. I'm forgetting the last 2.
That's pretty good.
8 is really good. But the reason didn't seem to be because the presentation matched their preferred learning style, but because they employed a memory strategy.
So as you were showing, I was making an order in my head. So as I saw more, I would just add it to the list, and I was repeating the list as I was looking at them, so I could just say it out loud.
This is obviously anecdotal evidence, but rigorous studies like the one I outlined have been conducted. For example, one looked at visualizers versus verbalizers instead of visual versus auditory learners. The study was computer-based. So first, students' learning styles were assessed using questions like, would you rather read a paragraph or see a diagram describing an atom? The researchers also provided some challenging explanations with 2 buttons, visual help or verbal help. The visual one played a short animation, whereas the verbal help gave a written explanation. From these measures combined, the researchers categorized the students as either visualizers or verbalizers, and then the students were randomly assigned to go through a text-based or picture-based lesson on electronics. When a student hovered their mouse over keywords in the lesson, in the text-based group, a definition and clarification came up. But in the picture group, an annotated diagram was shown instead. And after the lesson, the students did a test to assess their learning. The students whose preferred learning style matched their instruction performed no better on the tests than those whose instruction was mismatched. But how can this be? If we accept that some people are more skilled at interpreting and remembering certain kinds of stimuli than others, like visual or auditory, then why don't we see differences in learning or recall with different presentations? Well, it's because what we actually want people to recall is not the precise nature of the images or the pitch or quality of the sound, it's the meaning behind the presentations. There are some tasks that obviously require the use of a particular modality. Learning about music, for example, should have an auditory component. Similarly, learning about geography will involve looking at maps. And some people will have greater aptitude to learn one task over another. Someone with perfect pitch, for example, will be better able to recall certain tones in music. Someone with excellent visuospatial reasoning will be better at learning the locations of countries on a map. But the claim of learning style theories is that these preferences will be consistent across learning domains. The person with perfect pitch should learn everything better auditorily. But that is clearly not the case.
What we're expecting is if your style was honored, you're going to perform better than if you had some experience that conflicted with your style. And this is where we don't see any support for the learning styles theory.
One of the reasons many people find learning styles so convincing is because they already believe it to be true. For example, they may already think that they're a visual learner, and then when a teacher shows them a diagram of, say, a bike pump, and suddenly the concept clicks, well, they interpret this as evidence for their visual learning style.
You already believe that learning styles is right. When you have an experience, the first thing you think is that in some way consistent with learning styles? And if it is, you don't think further.
When in reality, that diagram might just be a great diagram that would have helped anyone learn. When we already believe the world to be a certain way, then we interpret new experiences to fit with those beliefs, whether they actually do or not.